All right, and let me go back to sharing my screen. All right, and we're back. So there wasn't really a lot in terms of WordPress news and events since last we spoke. In fact, I know, Sue, you stole my thunder for a couple of days, but that's okay because it's been kind of a dry month. So just a reminder, we talked about this last month. WordPress has this annual Meetup survey for people attending meetups like yourselves. If you don't mind, please just take a couple minutes to complete it. I'll put the link to it in the chat window afterwards. We'll send it out when we send out the link to the recording here. But your feedback is really valuable, both to us as hosts, but also to WordPress itself. As Peter had mentioned earlier, you know, sometimes I do think that some of the feedback they get is from other WordPress technical people and all that. It's good to have regular people, maybe non-technical people or beginners, give them a bit more feedback. So just to, you know, again, keep things balanced a bit in terms of what they're hearing. So I'll put a link to that below, and I think it ends probably, I believe, at the end of this month is when you can submit your answers, and it's all anonymous as well. Also, as we talked about last month, the WordCamp US just ended. So it ended last week. It was in San Diego, in person, again, in person and hybrid. So the good thing about it is the fact it was hybrid. So the recordings of that are available on the WordCamp Central YouTube channel. So just do a search for that, or you can type in, you know, WordCamp US 2022 recordings. You can find it through Google that way. A lot of different sessions. I'll admit I haven't gone through them all. You can still go to the website. That's probably a good thing to do too. If you go to WordCamp US, the website, it'll show you the breakdowns of the different sessions and schedules, so you can kind of pick what you want. Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if anyone else has viewed it yet, I believe the way they put the recordings out is basically like the entire day. So you've got to fast forward and kind of find the session that you want. So, but again, it's great. This goes back to the fact that if you can't make it to San Diego, you know, for a WordCamp, especially WordCamp US, it's still available to everyone. So anyway. All right, tool or tip spotlights. So I'll stop here. You got anything for us?
I do. I do. Yeah, let me grab the screen if I can find the right one. There we go. Am I sharing?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. So real quick on events, and I'll come back to the main tool or tip. There's a couple of places that are trying to keep track of some of all of the events. One of them is actually wp.events. It's all of these that have user-generated content. They do their best, but they're also relying on other people to add content to it. So one of them here is WP Events, and another one is WPLivestream.com. I enjoy, and I have the luxury of working from home, and I can hop onto some of the live streams that are happening there, and there's a couple that I'm involved in. So that's kind of events. But Accessibility Day, another event coming up. We'll talk about it again, but it's November 23rd. The tool that I really like, that came in handy for a very specific project, and a lot of the things that I talk about are stuff that like help me out with something. And there's a number of online converters, but cloudconvert.com is really nice. And one of the things that I used it for, so in the Cloud Convert, you can convert from so many file formats to so many file formats. And in fact, it was interesting. There was on one of the live streams, I talked about it. They were doing something where they converted a font file to a different font file type. It gets into that level of file transfer, you know, based on putting fonts on your website and things like that. I used it for a PDF, so PDF to Word document. And you upload your file, and when you grab the file, so I don't need to go through the whole process right now, but I grabbed that file, and the Word document, I compared it to a couple other conversion products, the output was really great. And one of the things that really helped me, because what I needed to do is I needed to grab the content out of the PDF file. The PDF file was created by somebody who created it in Canva. Now, Canva is not a word processor. It's a design tool. but they're using it to create this big long newsletter. And this cloud convert PDF to Word doc conversion that I used did a great job. It looked practically exactly like the original PDF. And instead of, if anyone's ever converted a PDF file or try to copy out of a PDF file, you may find that words are like individual lines or in different places. It all has to do with how they're created. And this tool gave me exactly what I needed. Then I could copy and paste the text out of the PDF now that it was in a Word document and had been converted into full paragraphs and sentences and all. So cloud convert, if you needed to convert a ping file that was really big to a more efficient JPEG for a photo, and on and on. But it's a great tool, online tool for converting one file to another file type. I like it.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right, so let's jump into our topic today. And our topic is a funny one, because I think it kind of came up from past discussions, right, Peter? Maybe, or was it?
It was a couple of things. One was actually something we started talking about in a couple of meetups. One about the media library, another one was somebody was having trouble with some of the docs that you have, and with a client that I have a client that I'm working with that is converting a website that has content from 2014 in it, and it has literally gigabytes of data. So it's it was sort of a a current topic.
Hot topic.
Hot topic. That's much better way of saying it.
It's a hot topic. Cool. So that's the that's kind of the background of it. But also, I think it's one of those that is, especially when we're putting the slides together, it's something every website owner at a certain point needs to consider. So again, our topic tonight is decluttering your website without breaking it is the important part of it. So you can declutter, but I think a lot of people, that was our other part of this discussion too, especially beginners. People are hesitant to delete things or remove things or touch anything that basically, if you don't understand, which is understandable, like you don't want to break the site. So we're going to hopefully give you more confidence today about what things you can clean up and how to do them safely. So our agenda, we'll do some quick introductions of Peter and myself. Then we'll both kind of cover just the broader context of, what do we mean by website clutter, and why is it a good idea for you to declutter? And Peter will cover cleaning up themes, plugins, and media files. Those are some of the big things that can lead to clutter on a website. And then I'll kind of cover some of the other stuff, probably less obvious things like post revisions, pages, etc. So we'll try to, again, keep this to like an hour-ish, and then wrap up some final thoughts, Q&A for this, and then we'll open it up to our larger Q&A. So real quick, who am I? Again, if you're here for the first time, I'm Ray. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Hartford WordPress Meetup. I've been in IT, I should update that, 25 plus, that covers a broad range. I've really started, and most of my career was a software developer / systems architect, worked for some large corporations. I've been using WordPress around 6+ years now. Currently self-employed, have my own website design development business. Live in Newington, Connecticut, married, no kids, and we have one crazy old cat, and I'm a geek. Peter.
Yeah, I'm Peter Ingersoll. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut. I build and maintain websites for a variety of clients. I've been building websites for more than 10 years in WordPress. And just the thing I do is use things like technology to do other things like, sell or convert or encourage. And also I'm self-taught in the things that we do. I am married with 2 adult children, and we have 3 cats now.
Do you?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes.
We're cat people.
They're locked out of the room until they bang on the door too much.
Awesome. All right, so let's kick things off a little bit about just doing some definitions here. So what do we mean by website clutter? And Peter, we'll jump in, or I'll read these at first, and then chime in with some additional thoughts. So again, what do we mean by website clutter? So clutter is, this in our context means just any unnecessary content So unnecessary content, software, files, data on your website. So things that over time have just, accumulated on your site. And that clutter really can slow down your website performance, or just take up server resources, disk space, or pose security risks. As Peter, I think we'll talk a little bit later about, plugins and themes in particular. If you have code sitting on your site, even if it's not necessarily something that you're using, if it's active on your site, it could pose security risks. So one other kind of subtle thing around clutter is that, the more clutter that you have on your site, the more complex your site becomes. And that's something I think is underappreciated. So for those of us who, do website development or freelancers for a living, I'm sure many of you have logged on to a client's site or somebody's brand new site trying to understand it. And the first thing, some of these things can take your breath away. You're like, where do I begin? They're trying to WordPress itself is not complex as some, applications I've worked on in the past, but people can make it complex over time, and clutter helps lead to that complexity. So, a lean website is easier to understand and easier to maintain over time.
Yeah, and I think the clutter breeds clutter. As you clean up and then get into new habits, and we kind of talk about that at the end, we just say, hey, establish new habit. But when a website is cluttered and you add something, it gets more cluttered, and you can't see the thing that's making it cluttered because there's so much. So yeah, it can get out of hand pretty quickly.
And I see Sherry on here, but Sherry, my analogy is clutter is like weeds. You pull the weeds, they come back.
Yeah.
At this point of the year, I'm like, just let the weeds take over. But you know what I mean? It's like it keeps coming back over time. So that's clutter. So again, where does this come from? So you'd be surprised with a brand. So think about a brand new WordPress install. So for some of you who maybe are real beginners and you've just, let's say, created a site someplace with your hosting company. Well, your hosting company could be the first culprit in terms of introducing clutter. So a lot of hosting companies will install additional themes or plugins, starter packs, they'll sometimes call it, starter themes, etc. And some of them are for good intents, like caching. So I use SiteGround still for my personal site. So SiteGround for new sites will add like a SiteGround caching, or I think they call it like a performance plugin, and there's a security one as well. So some of those are okay, but I've worked on sites, and I used to have, when I first started WordPress, I was using Bluehost, as my hosting, and boy, were they'd give you a lot of clutter just, as you created a new site. So that's the first place. It could just be nothing you did, but when your site was first installed, it may have come with some additional baggage. One I don't see quite as often anymore is this idea of like these marketplace plugins. So I know I used to see this, I'm thinking whether it was Bluehost or HostGator, but it was this idea of there's a plugin that basically was like another, it's almost like it was like a fake WordPress.org repository. So you'd go there and add additional plugins and all that. So a lot of people would be afraid of removing that because it's like, well, do I need this? What do I do with it? It's, again, if it's not actively doing anything on your site, it's probably just another gateway into additional clutter. Do you want to cover, Peter, I'll stop talking for a minute. You want to cover these last couple in here?
Where are we at? Because I was
demo content from the theme.
Yeah, demo. Oh yeah. This is a big one. So because I was thinking about, again, those installs where all of a sudden you go in and there's all of this stuff. Same type of thing from, you load a theme, you try something out, you might try to start a site, and all of a sudden, hey, that looks great, but now you have this content that you were just experimenting with. Having those great themes that give you starter templates that you might try, but now you have that content on your site. And if you forget to go through like their removal process, you might get stuff left over. Purchased themes with bundled required recommended plugins. Yeah, sometimes you load something up, or you'll even load, even I've done this, you load a theme, and then next thing you know, there's 6 plugins that are loaded with it because it's required for it to work. So just being aware of those types of things that might come up with stuff. And then, just the backup themes, right? Having themes are one of the culprits because they're easy to ignore, and yet they load, they sit there, just taking up space and being a distraction.
Yeah. So that's a new WordPress install. Over time, an old, let's say an ongoing WordPress site, You also get clutter introduced. Some it's by people, so
Yeah.
if you've worked on a site for a while, let's say you're a nonprofit and you've had multiple site, webmasters over time, previous administrators, other people who just have enough knowledge or power have probably introduced some clutter. Maybe they've tried out plugins or different things. So, that's where if you're coming on with a fresh set of eyes, it's probably a good time to kind of look back and understand obviously why somebody installed something, but it's probably a good time to kind of think about, is this still needed or not? Testing themes and plugins. We do this. Those of us doing demos do this very often. If you look at our sites, at least the one I'm going to probably show today is probably one of the worst ones, because I'm always just testing stuff out. And there's better ways to do this. Maybe we'll cover that later, of just cleaning this stuff up. But anyway, that's a thing too. If you're just trying something out, remember to clean it up afterwards. I'll finish these last two, Peter. So duplicate functionality. I've seen that quite often for client sites where I see 3 different slider plugins. I see 2 different form plugins. You see different SEO plugins. You're like, why? It's because over time somebody installed one, either moved on to something else, but they forgot to remove the old one, or were afraid to. And I think we'll talk about again not being afraid. And then this one's a little bit. This is not anyone's fault, but there are a lot of plugins that are not good WordPress citizens. So. There's quite a few plugins that you've uninstalled the plugin, but unbeknownst to you, that plugin did not clean up its own mess. And sometimes that's not something you'd ever be aware of unless, where you may see this is in the future, you reinstall a plugin and all of a sudden remembered all your configuration settings. Like, oh, that's clever. It's because it never cleaned up its tables. So this one, we probably won't spend a lot of time talking about how to do it, but just be aware of the fact that, things, especially plugins, may not erase themselves completely from your site.
Yeah. Just to add, Karen is putting some comments in that I think apply to this topic here, and maybe after our main, trying to keep it efficient, and then coming back to some of the even the deeper topics. Having old content because you do things that maybe there's an annual post of things, or a developer created a certain way that just doesn't apply to what you want to do, and now extracting yourself from that, or just another thing that I've run into is a site that had files, and this might be something we talk about post, Ray, is files that were not part of the WordPress file structure, but were taking a huge amount of space on the server, and actually were being referenced because of the way they imported code from like an old HTML site. So it lurks around every corner.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So again, our caveats with all this stuff is before you start cleaning, this is to being safe. The safest thing to do is always make sure you have a backup of your site, or you're taking backups of your site, or prior to doing anything, especially anything significant, make a backup of your website. So that's really the best, let's say, safest way to do any changes to your site. So that's always our #1 advice: do a backup of your site. If possible, depending on your WordPress plan or your level of expertise, test these things out first on a staging site. So for people who don't know, a staging site is basically a clone of your regular WordPress website, but it's a place where you can do things like this: test out plugin updates, test out changes to your site, etc. So if you're fortunate enough to be on hosting that provides a staging environment, that's a good place to do it. Or at some point, we really should cover that as a topic of how to create a staging environment. So anyway, that's a safe place to do it. I'll finish these off too, sorry. So incremental changes, that's always a key thing for, especially even plugin updates. Don't do it all at once. Do a few, do one change, test it out, make sure everything's good, do the next one, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of common sense there. And again, if your site is a mission critical, business critical site, you want to do this stuff off hours. Again, another safe thing to do, or put your site into maintenance mode even at that time, so you don't have people hitting it while you're in the middle of making changes. So again, these are just sort of good rules of thumb for any types of changes to your website, but especially for cleanup as well. Any other ones you can think of, Peter, of safety things before they begin?
No, I just, there are certain things that and we'll talk about as we get into it, that you can have more confidence about just getting rid of and checking right away. I know that there's the fear of deleting something. It's come up in the comments, and it's come up in previous conversations, and hopefully both with the backups and with the things that we're going to talk about, like feeling pretty good about, okay, this isn't anything I need, I'm going to get rid of it. But if I need to return back to it, what's the process, that type of thing. So,
Right.
yeah.
All right, so let's jump into, Peter, I can flip the slides if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
My time.
Yeah, that'd be great. So go ahead to the next.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. So, and I kind of put these somewhat in an order of easiest to harder. Although plugins the second, it all depends on how it is, but cleaning up themes. So the first thing is only one theme can be active at a time. So inactive themes can be removed, basically and essentially. So if you're sitting there and you go to your themes, we'll do this in the demo, and you look and you see that you've got like 6, 7, 12, 20, I've seen more than that, themes loaded that are inactive. Inactive is they're not doing anything, so they can be removed without fear. A lot of times what we'll do though is the recommendation is, and I've only needed this once in many years, but consider keeping an inactive default theme installed. What that means is you'll have your primary theme active, and then you might keep something like 2020 or 2022 if you're using a block theme also loaded on the site. And sometimes what might happen is, just as a matter of circumstance, something breaks in your theme, you'll at least have a backup theme that will become active, so that you get into your theme, into your site and fix it. So Ray, do you do that as a matter of practice? Do you keep
I do. It's
Yeah.
funny though. I've sometimes seen mixed advice around that at times.
Yeah.
Like I know WordPress, if you go, maybe it shows later, Peter, the site health thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if does it still flag that as a recommendation that you don't have?
Yes. Oh,
it's almost mixed, because when it's inactive, it flags that as a warning to say you don't have inactive themes. You're like, wait, which is it? So yeah, I generally do that. I generally keep the 2022, whatever the latest theme is.
Yeah, I leave the 2020 in because I'm not using block themes and all, but yeah, exactly. We'll go through it, but it's pretty simple to delete. You go into your admin appearance, go to your themes, go to theme details for any theme, which is you hover over, I'll show it to you, and then the delete is a little link in the bottom right. Any customizations to deleted themes may be less than, that's just a matter of, if you have an active theme, you've been using it all along, everything's great. You may have come from an older theme or some other theme that you might have done some customizations to. If you delete that theme, you're going to lose those. But if you've already migrated everything from that theme, it's probably not a problem. This is just be aware that, if you ever were to want to go back to that theme, and that happens very rarely, that you need, once you get to a certain point, you're in the new theme that you're using. So that's just a little caveat to pay attention to. So cleaning up plugins. Of course, again, the first thing is look for inactive plugins that you don't need. And literally you can look at it and go, I don't use that. And it's inactive, so you're not using it. And, especially if that plugin is inactive, if a plugin is inactive, it has no impact on your website. Even when you're testing plugins to see, a lot of times one of the first things that happens when you run into an error, the advice would be, well, turn off all your plugins and then turn them back on. You can activate and deactivate a plugin without issue, but when you have a plugin that is inactive, it is not doing anything. So if you've got one that's been sitting there not doing anything, it's pretty safe to be able to delete it. In fact, you could probably delete it and bring it back. The only time there's any issue with that is, again, if you have something that you've set up a lot of settings for, custom settings, and you've made it inactive and you want to use it again, you don't want to delete that because those settings will go away. But if it's just something that you tried and you're not using, or Hello Dolly is still sitting on your website and you don't care about Hello Dolly and it's inactive, you can delete it. So and there you could, and I do this with certain plugins, like say I'm using something like a search and replace plugin or something that I only use occasion. I'll use it and then I'll make it inactive and I'll still leave it on the site if I know that I'm going to use it again in some short period of time. I could also delete it and reinstall it, some of those utility things. But sometimes you can do that with a utility plugin, that you could just leave it inactive. But if a plugin's inactive, you can put it on the list of at least consideration for deleting. Look for active plugins that you've tested but don't use. And this is a big thing where it is active, but you're not using it. And in those cases, deactivate and check for any impact, then delete when ready. So, hey, I'm not using this. Let me deactivate it, and then let's see if there's any impact on it. You go through your site and consolidate and remove redundant and outdated plugins. Go into the next slide. We'll get in a little bit more detail on that, which is, look for plugins that are similar, but you should only use one of. All right, so Ray mentioned the slideshows. That's a very common thing because people experiment. Slideshows, galleries, things like that. SEO plugins, backup plugins that you might have tried. You might have multiple forms, image optimizers. All these types of categories of plugins, you only want to use one SEO plugin. So therefore, if you've loaded multiple, make sure you know which one you've selected, and then delete or deactivate and remove those that don't apply. Look for plugins that are outdated by better alternatives that may be offered by other active plugins or now in core. This is in the matter of going in and looking and saying, oh, this plugin hasn't been updated for 6 years. One, do you need it? And two, is there new ways of doing things? And I can show some of that. And then keep in mind that things like multiple block packages, now that we're in the block editor, a lot of people are using it, you have a lot of similarity with blocks, and you might have something loaded where you're only using one or not even you experimented. So trying to consolidate and say, all right, well, I might like this one type of block better in this package, but I like everything else. You can decide to make that compromise and say, I can adapt and use. So, looking for those redundant things. On our next slide, cleaning up media files. This can get crazy because your media file library can get real big real fast. You can have a lot of things that you've uploaded and not used, that you've uploaded multiple times, that it was part of something that isn't active. So it's something that can be tedious to deal with, but there are some tools. People, and I did this, so I looked at it and said, okay, what's an unattached file versus an attached file? And I'll tell you, unattached, when we look at the media library, I'll show you, a status of a file could be, quote, unattached. That doesn't mean it's not being used anywhere. It sounds like it is. Hey, it's not attached to anything. But attached files are those that were uploaded at the time of doing the editing of a post or a page, whereas an unattached file were added to the library directly. Even if they are being used in a post, you could have a whole bunch of images that you loaded. Maybe you did a drag and drop of 20 images, and you started picking the ones that you wanted to use. They will all still show as unattached. So unattached is not really a reliable thing. It's an indicator. You can look at it and say, oh, that's unattached. Let me look at those and go, I know I don't use that image. That's something that goes on the, hey, I can delete list. So, in the media library, you're also looking for old images and files, duplicates, those that you, again, know that you're not on your site. So the previous theme sometimes, and what happens when you look in the media library, you might find this is very often with things like if you've tried starter templates and things, where you'll see a block of images that you definitely know. It's like stock photography from some template that you tried, and you say, I'm not using those on my site. So those are definitely on the list to clean up your media library. Unnecessary generated thumbnails can also be cleaned up. We might want to spend a little bit of time on that if we've got time. One of the things that happens is when you upload images is that thumbnails are made, and you have multiple versions of a file sitting on your server, and depending on plugins that you have, things in your theme potentially, if you set up custom sizes for images, you may find, and this is not unusual, if you've got a WooCommerce site, for example, that you upload an image and then there are 12 different sizes of that image, cropped and smaller and things like that. So there are ways of cleaning that up, and that's again, now that's more on the server side, like, hey, I got all these files taking up space, but it is something to consider. The next slide is so we'll talk about some of these plugins that can help. There are some plugins. The most popular one for the media library is Media Cleaner. And I'll show you, they have a lot of, hey, make sure to back up your site, make copies, maybe if you're somebody who uses FTP, download your media files, that's important too. But it is a tool. There's a pro version, we'll get into that. There's something called Media Deduper that is looking for files that are of the same size, or basically the same, those files that look like, have all indicators that say this is the same image. And that happens a lot, where I go to client sites and go, they've uploaded the same image 6 times. Like, instead of going to the media library, maybe they use it repeatedly and they just keep uploading a new version. The Regenerate Thumbnails Advanced is something that can be used to clean up thumbnails. Then there are things that we probably won't go into unless we've got time at the end, where we go into things like Firebird for managing your media library. And then Folders, which is another type of file manager that allows you to kind of control, like in the declutter process. Now you can start having a little bit more control over things by organizing your information a little bit more. So why don't I then get right into some of these things? Let me pull this in. And Ray, feel free to not only jump in, but say, let's come back to that, or
yeah, that's fine.
Because
we're trying to keep to our 1 hour.
We're trying to keep to our time, and I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot here. Are you seeing anything yet, or did I not share this?
I'm seeing the WordPress background.
Okay, great. So this, all right. So here's a version of the site that we've been building. If anyone new, you can go back to our previous videos. We built this site. I made a copy of it. It's called Sandbox, so I'm not playing with the build site that we'll come back to it at some point for sure. But there's some familiarity to it. So if I look at the dashboard of this site, right? So the first thing I want to look at is the themes. We talked about the themes. So in the dashboard, appearance, themes. When I click on that section, I'm going to see, like, I have loaded, just to for experiment purposes and to show here, a number of themes. The active theme is always going to be that first theme listed in your display of themes. It will say active. If you go to the theme details, it doesn't have the delete choice here because it is your active theme. If it needs to be updated, you could get an update here, but that's your active theme. All these other themes, if I go to theme details, they are not active. I'm not using them on this site. And this is where in the bottom right, you have the delete key. Now, if I know I'm not using Astra, I might have tried it. I can delete it and hit OK. And now it goes off the list. And I can go through any of the themes that I don't like, I'm not using. And here, in terms of confidence, as I showed you, you can't delete your active theme because you don't have that option. So that's kind of, feel a little safe on that kind of thing. So if I can keep deleting these, we don't have to go through all of them. But here's where I might want to leave the, I don't even have it here. Maybe I want to actually add, because I'm not using the block theme, but I want to add the 2020 theme. So I'm going to install that one just to have that backup theme. And I'm not going to activate it, but if I look at my themes now, you'll see that I have 2020 activated, and I can continue to delete the rest of the themes. So that's pretty much it for deleting themes. If it's
yeah, Rick has a question.
Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute, Rick.
What about deleting child themes? Can you delete the original and leave the child theme behind in case you ever need any customization that you'd parked in there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not sure that I know the answer, because whenever I've had a child theme, and if I moved away from that theme, I didn't need that because I'm dealing with my whole new theme. Ray, do you have experience with that directly?
Well, I thought where you're going, Rick, was more of I haven't done it in a while because using Cadence, I haven't really created the child theme in a bit. But I thought WordPress gives you an error if you're trying to delete the parent if you're using a child theme.
Yeah, that'll happen. This is required for the child theme. I get
But
that.
if you're, I guess, Rick, that was your question of, is it okay to just leave the child theme alone and delete the parent if you've moved on to another theme, you mean?
Right. Just as
I don't-
as a safety issue, just for my own comfort. If I created a child theme and I adjusted the footer and I know what I did, but I just don't want to throw that footer away.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
the
so
child
can
theme is
I-
not going to be, if the parent isn't there, the child theme is not going to be applied to anything.
Yeah.
So if you switch
It
themes,
can never be activated. I realize
it
that.
won't, yeah, but it's like, I would say at that point, it's clutter, because all that code and everything doesn't apply. So you may want to go to the backup thing, you may want to back it up, or depending on how complex your child theme is, child theme may have a lot of
And you're
PHP
gonna get,
files
you're
and
gonna get an error message every single time you look at
good
the
point.
the
Yeah, good point,
appearance
Sue.
screen.
Yeah.
Get
There's
an error
no,
message when?
whenever you look at, you're gonna get an error message. It may be when you
Yeah.
look at appearance themes, it might be on your main screen, but if you want to keep what's in the child theme, presumably you've done it in the style sheet and the functions for the child theme, which you can copy and paste and save somewhere.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that, Sue. That, yeah, if you have a child theme where you have deleted the parent, let's say you moved on to a new theme, that child theme will kind of show up with an error message. I don't recall exactly what it looks like when in the screen that Peter's looking at. It'll say missing parent theme or something. So yeah, so in that case, it's probably causing more confusion of, people are gonna think your site's broken, even though you're not really using the child theme.
Well,
I'll bring my flag down.
Yeah.
yeah, and another thing that you could do, and I have, this has happened with a site where I moved off of the theme, had a child theme, another one. But if I'm going to keep the child theme, I'm going to keep the parent theme of that other theme in the quote, just in case. And that might even be my default theme. My fallback might be that, like,
In an earlier
2020.
in an earlier conversation, you said we could delete a plugin and then pull it back in if we needed it. And so I was applying that same logic to, if we built a child theme, we park something in there, we delete the parent theme, and if we ever want the parent theme back, then we can pull the parent theme back in and then activate the child. So that was my thought process.
Yeah, I think we're kind of all in agreement that the files will be sitting there, but then you're going to keep getting that error because it's going to want to load, because it does go into a different directory, a different theme. So in the hierarchy of files, you'll have your child will be in its own folder on the server below that. Yeah, and like the plugins, if you delete the plugin, unless there are customizations that you've created that are directly tied, and some plugins will delete the customizations, some plugins will leave them to the addition of Clutter, and others will ask you. Those are my favorite, the ones that'll say, even when you're deleting, do you want us to remove all data associated with this or just the plugin in case you want to go back to it? So there's the better coded things to me are the ones that give you the most information, so that you're making,
The one plugin, to piggyback on what Peter just said, he's absolutely right. But the plugin that does that the worst, in my experience, of not cleaning itself out, lets you pre-check it before you try to delete it, is Modern Events Calendar. It leaves all kinds of junk behind, but you have to choose that before you delete it. It doesn't ask you while you're deleting.
Yeah.
Oh, the one that I found is rank math. So I tried rank math on all the sites, and then you go back into your SQL tables and you see all of these tables that are tied to SEO, and I think a number of other SEO, Yoast too. Leave rank math. In fact, I did searches, and there's people who have code and things out there to clean up your rank math leftover information. So why don't we go right into plugins then? So install plugins. Now I'm going again in our dashboard, the plugins section of our menu. And now the first thing we'll look at is, I know it's pale highlighting. It's not necessarily the best in terms of accessibility, but those that are active are highlighted blue. Those that are inactive are white. Of course, you have the word activate if it's inactive, deactivate, activate if it's not active, deactivate if it is active. And you can see that we've got a whole bunch of things in here that we may or may not need. So one of the first things, again, is looking at some of the things. We'll say, okay, if something is inactive, you could probably get rid of it. Now, in some cases, I'm not going to get rid of it because of some of the things that I might, that we're going to talk about. But maybe, here's an example of, I've got Yoast SEO loaded, I've got Slim SEO, I've got SEO Press, I've got Rank Math. All of these were something that I may have tried, and in fact, right now I think we were. I don't have anything active on this, but for example, say we were using SEO Press as that was the SEO plugin we decided to use. Well, I can simply go in here and go to Yoast, click on that, go to Slim SEO, which I like a lot, go to Rank Math. I think that was it on those, and then go to bulk actions, and then go to delete. I have the option to delete because they're already deactivated. In plugins, you need to go through the process of first deactivating something if it's active, and then you can delete it. That's, again, another little safeguard. When I delete that, now I'm getting rid of those types of things that that I'm not using, those plugins. So now Yoast is gone. I'm not using Yoast. Another, you often find you have a number of backup plugins used, and a way to even shorthand this is, and a lot of people don't use these so much, of the links at the top of pretty much any of your admin lists will give you a little, like, say you say, just show me all my inactive plugins. And now you're looking at the inactive plugins and go, okay, so the Duplicator is a backup plugin, and Updraft Plus is a backup plugin I haven't activated, but maybe I know that I'm definitely not using Duplicator, and I could just delete it by clicking on delete, or again in the bulk delete. Better search and replace, or any of the search and replace. That's an example of a plugin that I often deactivate because I only use it when I need to go in and do a specific thing, but I might still leave it. It's a small plugin, doesn't have a whole lot of stuff. But if I find that I've got a site that I'm just not coming back to, I don't need to do that, I can just remove that plugin. So, that's a way of looking at plugins. Now, where it starts getting really, and I don't want to spend too much time, is when we get things where there's a certain level of redundancy on things, or stuff that can be updated. And I'm going to give you this very specific example. This is something that I ran into. Now, Table Press. Does anybody here, while I bring up a page, does anybody here use Table Press, the plugin?
Sue does.
Okay, so Table Press is a plugin for creating tables. It was a very, very handy, where you can go in, you create a plugin, you create a table, you fill all this stuff out, and then you get a short code, which is great, worked great. And I set up a page here. And this is something that, again, I just did. Let me go to my table of movies, right? So I have this page that I created. This is the Table Press table, right? And there's definitely benefits to some of the things that it has on it, right? Some of the sorting and things like that. So there's a reason you might want to use Table Press. But I've seen people use it just because they needed a table, a simple table. So in that particular case, we could say, well, do you really need to have a plugin and a short code? If I go on the edit the page here, I have a block that has a short code, table ID equals 1. That's a Table Press way of doing things. Well, another option is WordPress has a table block. Now, again, not with all this functionality built in, but for a lot of times, again, if you see something, go, I don't need all that, I'm not using that. Right now, I just copied that, and I should be able to. I've done this before. Let's see if it was going to work here. This is live, where if I just paste that in, that's a core block, right? So let me put a spacer here. I'm going to put a little spacer. Now if I update that and then view the page, okay. So This is the table press plugin with, it has got the functionality and design. This is WordPress core table. And there's other things you do, but maybe you have just a simple table on a site and you've downloaded this plugin because somebody said, hey, if you're going to put a table, use table press. Well, you know what? All I wanted was that simple table. I'm going to come back to that page. I'm going to go to that short code and I'm going to remove it. It's not a table press table anymore. It's a core table. Update that. And now I can go all the way back to this installed plugin, table press. I only had that one table. Now I came across a site that had 10 tables in table press, but they were all very simple tables. It was just how with pre-block editor, the way the person put tables in, and he had these 10 very simple tables. I did that simple copy and paste, created the tables I needed. Then I deactivated that table press plugin. And then once it's deactivated, then I deleted it.
But I think you bring up you bring up a good point to kind of reiterate it though, Peter, which is that some people may not be aware of the fact that the plugin that they used is actually outputting a short code, so that now this screen, I assume when you refresh this, you're just going to see the short code sitting as text someplace on the page.
Yeah, you would have, but I deleted it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's something to be aware of. Exactly. It's like when you deactivating, deleting something, just you've got to have that knowledge of where was that plugin, how is that plugin being used and incorporated into your posts and pages. So
yeah, and I'll tell you one place where I see that, and this can get crazy, and I'm dealing with another website that has this. Let me see if I can pull this up. I think I created an example of, okay, so the short code. So I've got this this page using short codes, using blocks, right? So there is a plugin, very popular plugin at one point, called Short Codes Ultimate. Anybody use Short Codes Ultimate?
We used to. It was our go-to plugin when there were no others.
When there were no others, it was the go-to.
Shoot, we have the pro version.
Yeah, and in short codes, when you go, can't even remember where it shows you all of the stuff. There's a huge list of like all the types of things, and they're all design elements. Right? So I want to put a light box and a button and things like that. So, okay, you get and once you install it, here's the code to make that button. You have all these short codes, right? Well, if I go back to this page here and I'll show you in the back end, edit the page. Here's using the classic editor near, here's the short codes. And if I go to here and edit it to HTML, here's all of that code to make that short code work, right? SU row, column, whatever. Well, in WordPress using the block editor, I'm using the column block. I put the images in, and so it's all built in the core. I don't need something like short code. Now, if I went, we'll do that real quick. This is is it safe to then just remove it? Well, you have to be careful. And one of the things I've done is this is where I use search and replace, or actually I can just go into my page search and search for ~SU_ and say, show me all the pages where there's a short code being used. Because if I go back to those, to the plugins, let me close this. Here's my plugins. I go to my short code plugin and I deactivate that. This is the example you were saying, Ray. Now, if I refresh that page, now I'm going to see the short codes. I'm going to see those images that were embedded in there, kind of big on the screen, but there's my core block. there was a button shortcode that I used. I didn't show. I used the button block, you know, that type of thing. So a common thing that's out there, popular to use in decluttering, and again, the site, this whole plugin is used because they put a couple buttons on a couple of pages. And I was able to go in there and say, I looked, oh, okay, here's where they're using shortcode. I can replace it with a core button and turn off the plugin, check the site, didn't see any other issues, deleted the plugin. And here's the other thing about deleting plugins too. What you can do, and what I recommend doing, and in our recommendation about doing things incrementally and in steps, is you can deactivate the plugin, but you don't have to delete it right away. Just kind of put it on your calendar to come back and revisit your site and make sure other people can see your site and all. And if there's no issues, you can say, hey, I got it all. Yeah, that's an example of where now you get clutter because you have stuff that was meant to be done, you know, that was in place that now has been replaced by modern ways of doing things.
Peter, one quick one probably before you move to your next topic thing is, Sue had mentioned this in the chat, which I think is a good one as well, is kind of orphaned plugins in the sense of there's some plugins, and I'm thinking things like WooCommerce in particular, where you may have an additional, I forget what they even call them, but you know, it's like an additional plugin basically that relies on a parent plugin. Unfortunately, unlike child themes and all that, sometimes you may delete the parent plugin. Child plugins won't give you any warnings. They'll just sit there kind of dead, but they're not really working. So that's just something to be aware of too. If you see, you know, whatever child plugin things, you know, because they were add-ons, basically they were an add-on to the plugin, but you're not using that main plugin anymore. Those are ones that, you know, kind of can't.
Good catch on that. That's exactly something that happens quite often, you know, like, and even when I was looking at it and realized that there was a that shortcode. Their shortcode ultimate has add-ons that require that, and then are additional things. If I go and delete that shortcode ultimate, then if I had loaded those other plugins, what you're saying is, you know, I don't need now. Those other things don't even do. They can't be used, so they are free to be removed. Let's see if I redundant programs consolidate multiple. Oh, so the other one we don't need to go into a whole lot of time. What's that?
I'm sorry, media files. I thought was the last one you did.
Media files. The only other thing I was going to say in terms of blocks is that, again, this whole thing with having so many choices with block packages is going in and seeing what you're actually using and realizing that, you know, different collections of blocks, say you're using the cadence block, the cadence blocks, or the Astra blocks, which are now called Spectra. Things like that, that if you're loading both, you probably don't need both. So then there's, you know, we don't need to kind of get into the details.
Excuse me.
Those are the types of things to pay attention. Yep.
Karen's got a plugin she uses. Karen, you still here? She's got a plugin that she uses, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it detects where you've used different blocks on different pages.
I think that's one you mentioned. Find my blocks.
Find my blocks.
Yeah. That's it.
I love Find My Blocks for that very reason. That's where we put it in the resources at the end of this slide show. I think I even mentioned it in, but yeah, Find My Blocks. We'll install it, activate it. And now, just like everything, I have to go figure out where they put it. This is always like the Find My Blocks under tools. So Find My Blocks. And this is where it shows you all the blocks that you're using and where you're using it. And you can see that I'm using on the site cadence and generate blocks, and I know that that's good. Now, if I saw a Spectra block come up there, I'd say, I probably don't need to use it. I might be using a Spectra headline, but I'm also using cadence their headline block as well as the generate press. And in fact, I generate blocks. And in fact, a lot of times I don't even need generate blocks. I use them because I like them in some cases. But if I found that I'm like, hey, I'm only using it in one thing, I can convert that to the other. And it'll show me generate blocks headline. Where am I using? Here are the pages that I'm using 3 times in both. This is a fantastic plugin for doing, for really kind of cleaning up and going, oh, I got so much clutter and blocks. So now I want to see, where am I actually using these blocks? And this is a great tool for that. So I'm glad you brought it up. We did put it in the slideshow and at the end. So perfect. Yeah, there's more we can get into that, but let's go into the media library. So the media library, this is where I was saying you can look at the unattached files, for example, right? So you can sort your media library or filter your media library by various topics, categories of these things. So one of the choices is that unattached label, if you will, and it says, okay, these are files that are unattached. Well, they're not unattached. They are actually attached to certain, or they're in certain posts, but they weren't created that way. They were uploaded as a file, and then they were added when editing a post, and then attaching, going to add image from media file versus uploading that image. So that's why I say the unattached is a unreliable tool. Now, one of the first things you could do, let's go to screen options here. Just, this is something if you're not used to doing, you can go up to screen options and like increase your list. You can view images, and that'll give me now 100 images in my list view. Also, you have your grid view, and on your grid view, you can eyeball things and go, oh, I do or don't use those images. Like I've only used these two people in that example, but go, oh, that image isn't used anywhere, and I could go and delete permanently. Now, and that's the thing about the one thing about the media library is when you delete an image, it is a delete permanently, not a move to trash. So, but I can do that delete permanently. If you go into your list view, you can select multiple images in the same way you can do with pages and posts and things like that. In bulk actions, you can say delete permanently. But I'm already dilemma, gee, am I using that image somewhere? And managing the media library is not the easiest thing. In fact, this is probably the one thing, and Sue and Ray will probably, and anyone else will probably, agree that it's been the least paid attention to part of WordPress for quite a while. So there's a lot of tedium that goes along with things, but there are tools out there. And let's really quickly go install plugins, go through the whole process. There is something called Media Cleaner. Oh, I do have it active. Media Cleaner, when you load it, there's a number of images. It's the Meow Apps company. They have a number of things. Media Cleaner is the one that we've installed here. This is it on the repository. There is a pro version, and the pro version is really crawls your site and does a lot of really pretty amazing things. What this does is it adds a choice under your media library called Cleaner, and in the Cleaner, first of all, back up your database and your uploads directory. So they're saying, we're going to do something if you go to a certain point where you say, go and delete the files that we found. But the Media Cleaner plugin is saying, please back up just in case, you agree to delete something that all of a sudden you found is an issue. And I like this, please be considerate, don't blame Media Cleaner if deleted too many of that type of thing. So what we can do is there's a number of settings, but we'll just go with the default settings. And if I scan the library, and our library is not that big, so we should get some options here. We should happen pretty quickly. And now what it's saying, hey, you've got all of these images that are not found in any content. And I happen to know that they're not found in content because here's some images that I brought up that I just added to the media library, and I didn't do anything with them. I just added them to the media library. And in fact, there are 3 pages of this. You know, here's an example. If you were in with the build, I don't know, it's a very small thumbnail, but you see the cat on the side view. That was when we were experimenting with different hero images. We never used this one. So now here is a hero image that's not on a page, but it's in our media library. Now we might say, we might use that again. You might not want to delete it. And you don't have to. This is a tool to find things and decide whether you want to delete it. And again, you can select things. You can go, boy, I know I don't need these things. Again, pretty standard way. Either select everything by clicking the box, select the things that you want, and then go through the delete the 3 entries. So this is a tool for doing that. We don't have to go through the whole delete spot. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is you can also see that image plus 6 files. Those are all the thumbnails that got created at the time of uploading that image. So you can see, you know, all of these images in effect times 6 are now sitting on your server. We can use this tool to delete and select. You can do them one at a time. You can do you know, however you want to manage them.
Hey, Peter, we have a good question from Jill around, does this work on all file types or is it just images? So like, let's say you have PDFs or something in your media library, will this find those?
Yeah, I think in the pro version.
Okay.
Yeah, the pro version does a couple of things. One, I think that if we go back to the plugin, I think file system analysis, it goes and actually looks at kind of all the files.
Okay.
Yeah, so looking at how things work in some of the builders, things like that. So there's a lot of things in the Media Cleaner Pro, but for most people, for just kind of doing that, hey, let me start cleaning stuff up. It's a good tool. And there's one other. Go ahead.
Sorry, Sherry has a question about, can you just delete the thumbnails I guess in that free version? Do you know, can it just clean those up?
Yes, there is I've not done it that way, but I know that's one of the options. Quite honestly, somewhere it might be in the settings.
Up there.
But the other thing that you can do too, and that's another plugin. This is a plugin I like called did I not load it? Let's load it real quick. So Regenerate Thumbnails Advanced from our friends at Short Pixel. We've talked about them as an image optimizing plugin, shrinking the size of your image. But one of the things, they have a Regenerate Thumbnails. And by the way, I just found out that the Regenerate thumbnail, the original one that everybody used forever, hasn't been updated in a very long time, like a very long time. But the Regenerate thumbnails, and again, where do they put it? Right there, Regenerate Thumbnails. One of the things that you can do here is, as part of the regenerating process, you can set, well, what size images do I want? And then, you know, delete the ones. If I've unchecked things, for example, it will delete those. So there is a process of kind of cleaning up by regenerating. This happens if you change, for example, change your theme. And maybe your theme is generating thumbnail images for a certain layout. And then you change your theme and now you're not using any of those, but your new theme has different sizes. You might want to regenerate all your thumbnails and at part of that process say, get rid of these things. Or, you know, in this case, it's like, hey, if you got any files that are sitting there at 2048 by 2048 or 1536, I'm not using any of these images, don't recreate those files. So, you know, there are tools for doing that and Regenerate Thumbnails Advanced. This will give you that opportunity to manage your thumbnail regeneration and which ones to keep and not keep. There's one other one that I actually haven't tried, and if you indulge me just for a minute, it is the other one called Deduper. I guess I didn't know that. Add new. I know I'm cutting a new timer.
No, that's right. I think the things you're showing, as I said, are, if we look at order of importance of clutter, I think these are the big ones that most people will benefit from.
There's a plugin called Media Deduper. We're all experimenting with this one together right now. I don't know where it's going to put. In order to manage duplicate media, you must first generate the media index. Okay, let's do that. Index the media. So so what this is, I'm sure, doing is it's creating a table that is doing like hashtag, not hashtag, hashes, right? So a way of numerically encoding a file to know, all about it. And it's done. Manage duplicates now. They added it to media manage duplicates. If I go into there, it's showing me all the files that I've duplicated. And there is a way, as part of doing this, where I have to experiment. I know that if you delete one, it goes in and changes if the other one was used to then be replaced by the one you're keeping. So exciting, pretty neat way of cleaning things up. But I just found out about this one as part of this exercise, and am not really sure. Let's see if I delete this permanently. You're about to delete these files from your site. The action cannot be undone. So I don't know if that.
You got rid of them both.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's gonna probably not show me that duplicate, but I know.
Said in the comments, be very careful with media.
Yeah, exactly. But here's something at the very least you can go and see, why do I have this red-winged blackbird loaded 10 times, and now that's cluttering my media table and all, and now you can go clean it up. And I know there's an option. I haven't spent any time with it, folks. I'll try to, and I'll, in our Facebook group and all, I'll do a little bit of follow-up. I don't want to spend all that time right now, but I know if I go to let me go right. WordPress.org. And by the way, did you notice they reorganized
I saw something about it. Yeah.
One thing they did is they took that really wide menu.
Yeah.
They made it drop down. So they called downloads and extend plugins, in case anyone's wondering what happened to it. And if I go to deduper, this is where I think they managed it was all duplicates.
Yeah, back up your data. That's the big thing.
Was it up there? But anyway, here's the information. We've got the link. If you found that you have a lot of duplicates, this is yet another tool to at least give you an idea of what's bogging, why your media library is so filled with so much stuff that you just ultimately don't need, and it's hard to find files, and all of that kind of stuff. So a plugin to consider, and then maybe if there's any time, we could talk about some of the folder type plugins that kind of help organize things and all, and that's a way of sort of uncovering things. But yeah, I went way over my time, I'm sure.
That's all right. That's all right.
Okay.
I'm gonna grab let me grab the sharing. That's all right.
You got it.
No, I think that's good, because I think this was really the bulk of when we talk about cleaning things up. Those are probably the biggest bang for your buck in terms of priority, and the thing I think that most people will probably feel comfortable about cleaning up. What I'm going to cover, and I'll do this really quickly because I don't think there's a lot to this, is the other stuff. These will probably not make as much of a difference in terms of performance or whatever. These are just things to be aware of. So I'll cover, let's start with post revisions first off. So if you're not aware of the fact, hopefully everyone has experienced this in at some time, but WordPress is storing a record of every saved draft or published post, even custom post types as well. So the reason it's doing that is so that that it's a nice thing that's been built into WordPress, that you can restore a previous version. So you mess something up, you can go, we'll show this kind of quickly, you can visually go back to versions, you can see what changed, you can restore things. That's a great feature. It also has an auto save feature, which has saved my butt many times. it's saving behind the scenes. That one is not saving constantly and filling up your database, but there's always like a latest auto save every 60 seconds, whether you're, you know it or not. So that's really useful if your browser crashes, you get disconnected from the internet, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one that is, again, a post revision. So these things are saved in the WordPress database, just like everything else, all your regular posts and content. And again, this is getting back to, from a priority standpoint, this should not be your top priority, but it's something to be aware of that, so a large number of these in your database, it's not going to hurt website performance. It really won't, for visitors, I should say, but it does increase the size of a database, and especially databases or websites that have been around for a long time. These are probably ones where you want to at least take a look at this and be aware of it, because you've probably accumulated a lot of revisions. Or if you're a person like me, when I'm building a site, I'm doing tons of revisions on a page because I'm building it for a client. When I'm done with it, the final version I have is probably the final version I want to publish. So anyway, the way you can manage these things is manually through setting a setting in your WP config or a plugin, which I'll show a little bit later. Actually, no, I'm going to show it right now. Sorry. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but let me share my screen again. Oops, why did I do that? I'm sorry. I don't have to do that. I can just share my browser. 1 second. So we'll do this in just a minute or so. So I'm looking at one of these blog posts, for example. And again, like I said, everyone should know that when you go into a post, what's changed a little bit, if you're not familiar with the block editor, is that revisions normally in the classic editor, I think they're still in the sidebar, but here, if you haven't seen them, this is where you'll see them. They'll be inside the post tab. So rather than looking at the block, you need to be looking at the post tab. And if you click on the revisions, this shows you, again, this is the same old, kind of funny, this is the same old interface prior to the block editor or Gutenberg. So, the way you would do this, you look between these two options, and if you want to revert back to something, this is how you would go back to a previous version. So over time, as I said, you're going to have many of these building up. So one of the first things I'll show is how you can configure that. So WP revision control, let me just install this real quick, and we won't spend a lot of time using it. Oops, add new. So this is one plugin. There's other ways to do this too. I found this is probably the simplest one. So WP revisions control, it's still actively maintained. It's something you always want to see. And when you activate this, now this is, let's see, where does it put it? Oh, I know, this is a strange one too. So this puts it under settings for writing, and the information's in the plugin documentation. So here it's added this stuff now. So you could control how many revisions do you want to save. I think by default, unless I'm wrong, there is no limit. It'll just keep saving revisions till cows come home. So you can say that, let's say for posts, because I know I'm changing those quite often, I could put a limit on here. You don't have to do it for every one of these, but anyway, this is a way to control them. What's the right number? If you're somebody who's writing a blog, you want to have at least a few versions to be able to fall back to. But if you think about it, when are you ever going to go back to the 15th revision of something? At that point, you've probably forgotten what it is. You can probably just use a website backup instead to do that. So, a reasonable number, 5, 6, something like that. That's one way to control the number of revisions that are being saved. Now, what about all the revisions that you already have on posts? How do you identify those, or how do you clean those up? Is really what what's probably most important. So if I go to another plugin, and we have the links to these afterwards in the resources. One that I use, there's several of them, but the one I use is WP Optimize or Optimize WP. Let me search for Optimize. Some of these are named so much. There we go. WP Optimize. This one does a lot more than just revisions. I've used this for other things too, like this does some general database cleanup, and just like our other caveats about the media library, be cautious when doing this. In fact, the nice thing about this plugin is it'll do a dry run first. You can kind of see what it's going to affect. So one of the options that it can clean up for you, I've activated it. It's underneath. There it is. It has its own thing in the sidebar. So one of the things it can clean up is all post revisions. So let me just turn all these other settings off so you can just see that. So at this point, it's already run something for me, and it says, hey, you have 46 post revisions in your database. So if I run this cleanup, and again, this is my demo site, so I'm just going to check it off, run it. It deleted them all. So now I don't have 46 post revisions. If I didn't use that other plugin though, they're just going to build up again over time. So you want to kind of think of these in some combinations. You want to set a limit, a reasonable limit, and then this is the way to clean them up. I won't cover these other things too. Again, these are more advanced, but over time, databases get clutter of their own. Probably not something most websites need to consider. If you have a site that you do a lot of inserts into, or you're loading a lot of tables, that might be a time to consider using this a type of plugin like this that'll do some cleanup on those database tables for you. That's post revisions. Another one probably that's more common is when you're looking at a site that's been around for a while, you may have a need to delete an actual post or a page. When do you want to do this is, well, as you're reviewing your website content, you may come back to some blog posts that you wrote a while ago and say, is that content still relevant? Or maybe you had a page with some, I don't know, contact information or something. So let's say you have outdated or irrelevant content. That's a time where you may want to think about deleting a post or a page. Let's say something was poorly written. So your blog writer, you've gotten better over time, one would assume. So all that old content that would make you cringe now, it's like, what do I do with that? Well, so anyway, that would be a candidate for deleting. Or duplicate content. Think from an SEO standpoint. One of the things is having the most authoritative version of content out there, which again can be difficult to do. But let's say that you have a better page and an old one you want to get rid of. So ideally, in an ideal world, you don't want to delete things. In an ideal world, you want to just continue to update. And the reason for that is, from an SEO's perspective, just to really simplify things, a page itself has some SEO value. So a page that you've written over time, people have visited it, Google has crawled it, others, search engines have crawled it. So a page does have some ranking, or a factor of a ranking for a page is the age, is the age of both your website, but also the age of the content. So ideally, you want to just update existing things, but there may be a time where something's irrelevant and you do want to delete it. So let's talk about how to do that. One more slide. And this is where you want to be careful, because it's very easy to delete a page or a post in WordPress. There's a delete button, just like there is for everything else. But the problem is if you don't account for, how you want the user experience to be, like what if somebody had a link to that page? Or what if your site, you probably have links to an internal page? What's going to happen is anyone who clicks on anything that linked to that deleted page or post will get a 404 error, which is both a bad user experience, and then from a Google standpoint, it'll, if you're running Google Analytics or other things, you may get that flag to say, hey, you've got content here that's generating HTML errors. So that can have a negative SEO impact. So general rule of thumb. And a lot of this too is after a site's been published. If you're working on a site and nothing's been, your site isn't live, it's kind of hidden behind a coming soon thing, you can reorganize things as much as you like. It's just once you flip that switch, and I'll show you that in a second, and things have been indexed or crawled by by Google, then that's when you want to consider creating a redirect rule first. So I'll show you how to do that quickly. So let's say I have a post. We'll look at these. Let's say I have these news stories, or I have a news story 1, and let me just show you what this is. It's just a blog post here. It was just kind of garbage. Let's say I want to get rid of this now. This thing is no longer relevant. The first thing you've got to decide is, like I said, from a user experience standpoint, what do you want your visitors to see when they previously clicked on something or went to this page? Well, maybe in my case, I'm saying this old blog article is no longer relevant. The real one I want them to go to is this one instead. I want them to go to this story. So that's like your first mental decision you need to make before you create a redirect rule. What do I want to have happen from a user standpoint? Now that you've made that mental decision, fortunately, let's see, one of the plugins that is also very popular is, oops, let me add it again, is Redirection. There's lots of these out there, but this is the big one, the one with the flowers. I don't know why it's flowers, but 2 million installs, always a good sign too. So what this plugin does, it does a couple of things. So I'm going to set up the activation real quick for this plugin. So this tells you how to use it. I'll show a real simple example. But the other cool thing it does too is it can monitor any errors on your site. So any places you've missed, let's say you have some broken links on your site, it'll create a log for you of those. And you can look at that over time and say, oh, I missed that one. I need to create a redirect rule for it. And you can do that after the fact. So let me just start the setup real quick. Let's say we want to monitor changes. So it'll tell you to when something's changed. I don't remember if this one warns you. There's some other plugins I've used where if you delete a page, it'll say, hey, do you want to create a redirect rule? I don't think the basic version of this one does that. And let's keep a log of all our redirects. I don't know if I want that. Let's just continue. I don't have anything to install. All right, so now we're done. It's a pretty simple setup. So once this is set up, now you'll have a new tool here called Redirection. Let's begin. And by default, there's no redirect rules. So the way that you create a rule is, and this is something you want to do first before, again, hard-learned lesson here is do this first before you delete the page, because once you delete the page, it's harder to do afterwards. So let's say we want to add a redirect rule. So if you remember my example, this blog post, we don't want people going to it anymore. We want them going to the new one, this guy. So the first thing I want to do is just to make my life simple, I'm going to copy that whole URL from my browser. And the way these rules are set up is the source URL is a relative URL. So I'll show you what that means. That means I don't need this whole, my website, HTTPS, et cetera, I want to delete all of that stuff. And I just want this / whatever part of the URL. So anything after your website .com or .org name, that's the relative part of it. It even tells you it's gonna clean that up for me. And these you can leave alone, so we want it to match any parameters. And now here's the important part. Where do I want it to go? Well, in this case, I want it to go to this story, right? I went from story 1, I want it to go to story 3. This time, though, what you're putting in is an absolute URL. So you do need the full name, because you can actually send things to other websites. You can send things, et cetera, from a redirect standpoint. So now I'm going to add the redirect rule. And the cool thing too is it lets you test it out. So I can check out the redirect and the tool will tell you, here's what would happen to a visitor. So if somebody comes to this page, they're now going to be sent over from story 1, they're now going to go to story 3. And we can even really test it out again by, I still have this loaded. So if I try to refresh my browser, I'm going to do a hard refresh here. It should bring me to story 3. So now that I have that in place, the other cool thing is back to this logging. If I refresh this, you can see it's hit twice. That first time I did the demo, I tested it. Now when I just refresh my browser. So now that I've put in a redirect rule, now I can safely go back to my post. In this case, I'll go back to post, and now I can just delete, let's say story 1, that's the one I want to get rid of. I can just trash this. So something to consider, again, before you delete any post or page specifically, think about creating a redirect rule for it. All right, just for the sake of time, I'm going to go real quick. So these are some other things, real low priority, but things to consider from a clutter standpoint, especially if you've got an error message or let's say a warning from your hosting provider. Let's say you're running out of space. You're like, wait a minute, I'm running out of space. My site doesn't have that much on it. Things you may want to look for are server logs. And this would be something you'd have to go onto your hosting provider using usually cPanel or whatever interface they give you to look at your website hosting. That's where you want to look at things like the size of the server logs. So those can be the error logs that are saved behind the scenes. WordPress debug logs. So if you've ever been, you or maybe a developer that worked for you or worked on your site, they may have turned debug logging on your site, and that will start to fill up a log file pretty quickly. So those are some things to look for, any kind of like server log files that are large. The database we talked about also. So over time, let's say you've added lots of tables and rows. That may be something you want to clean up. That WP Optimize is a good one to at least crunch down existing tables. Spam comments, if you're still brave and you're taking comments on your website, go back. We did all the on spam previously, but those are things that can certainly pile up over time. Users is a very important one. I think we discussed this in security as well. So yes. Just recently, I looked at a site that had like 15 admin users on it for a client. I'm like, whoa, what is that? And over time, maybe people were adding everyone to the site, and they gave everyone by default admin access. So think about cleaning that up. Who still needs access to the site and what level of access do they need? So that, think about the roles for people. And then email is another one too, that if you're hosting your email on your website, let's say you have mailboxes on there that are built on your website, those are things that also can take up a lot of server space over time. Again, look at those and say, do I still need all those inboxes? Are people still using all these email accounts? If they're not, get rid of them. You can delete those. So in summary, final thoughts, and we covered a lot, and we're trying to get, luckily we've had some good conversations during this too. So, decluttering, just like the weeding of the garden, it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing thing. Make it a priority, schedule it out. Just think about it, either it doesn't have to be every week or every day, it's just, it could be a monthly thing or quarterly thing, but it does help, if you're keeping on top of it, just like keeping on top of weeds, it makes it easier. It's that first time, it's probably the hardest time to do it. Again, also the easiest time to remove something is right when you've introduced it. So you've added a new plugin or something, just like Peter was saying, let's say you're using a search and replace plugin or whatever. I use backup plugins. That's the best time while it's fresh in your mind to say, okay, it was a one-time thing, let me get rid of it then. Months later, you may come back and say, is it safe to do that? And again, a rule of thumb is before introducing new functionality onto your site, check if something already does it. Like even the redirects thing I just showed, that was really for demo purposes. I happen to use on many of my sites. I use SEO Press is the plugin that I use for SEO functionality. That has a redirect functionality built into it, so I don't need another one. So again, look if you have something on there already. Don't keep introducing new things on top of what you have. And then just finally, so everything else we're going to give lots of resources. So if you didn't copy everything down, we'll send out the slides that has a ton of additional info. Peter, any other kind of parting thoughts on Clutter?
Well, one of the things that came to mind real quick when you're talking about getting rid of posts and all, you can actually use that to your advantage. A lot of folks, what they do is they look at their old posts and then they update them, consolidate them, edit them, and then it now becomes a new updated post. So they're cleaning up their content by repurposing it for new posts, which is good for search engine optimization for updated content and things like that. So you can use that kind of management and cleaning up of your content to your advantage.
Right. So we have a couple. Again, we always go a bit over, but we're getting used to this format. So
yeah, this is new to us. Yeah. Plus, I want to give us a break. We took our time getting started too. So
yeah, exactly. So that's it. We're getting into this rhythm of we'll make these short and sweet and have plenty of time for questions. So we do have a couple of things in the chat. Hopefully, we have a little bit of time we can get to.
Yeah, they're both hard.
Yeah, Wendy's one, I would say that is more around performance cleanup. So that hold that thought, because I think what we'd like to do, if you don't mind joining us again next time, that might be a good example of us taking a look at your site or the site that you're referring to. We can run some scanning tools on it and
love that.
And dive into that a little bit. That's what we're hoping to use these sessions, like the back end of that for.
That would be great. That would be great. You'd be amazed at the things that can slow down a site that are all like interface or build or whatever, where it's
right.
It's a site I inherited, and all the recommendations are like a foreign language,
Okay. Whatever you're willing to share, we'll take
a look at that together. And then Jean has one about also kind of a tough one about the custom fields and being able to add a form to a page using assuming like the metadata. How do I do this? Well, I guess the one question I'd ask first, Jean, is what it depends on the form plugin that you're using, how easy it will be to use. So do you know what form plugin you're using?
Yes, it's the WP Forms.
It's WP Forms. And is it the pro version or is it the free version?
No, it's the free stuff. I'm just doing this stuff to learn. So no, nothing's pro to pay for. So everything is.
Which is exactly a great idea. And that may be the problem though. I don't use WP Forms, and Peter, I don't know if you do either. A lot of these, what you're trying to do of tying it to custom fields, in my experience, though, the couple I've used like Gravity Forms or Fluent Forms, you're probably gonna need a pro version to at least start experimenting with that. we can try, and this might be one again to do next time, is we can try to create a form like that using some custom fields. We have that on, Peter, we have that on the animal shelter site.
Yep. We do.
So that one, Gene, that may take a little bit of time just for us, the two of us, to fumble through it a bit, but that's a good learning experience. We can.
Right.
I can try the other forms. That was the first one that popped up. So
Well,
the
Fluent
WP
Forms,
forms.
yeah,
Yeah.
Fluent Forms would also, I think you need the pro version to connect it to custom fields.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll take a look but we can come back to that. But I do like Fluent Forms, Gravity Forms, and WS Form. WS Form is amazing, but it's one of the least known at this point.
Yeah. Do you think
and
that has
all
that?
for
Do you think it has it for free though, or that's one of the things they always kind of like, that's an advanced feature a lot of times.
Yeah, I don't know. WS Form, I think, is now in the repository. It wasn't at first, and I think it is now, but I'm not sure what he's included or not. WS Form Lite. Let me see if it included features on this one. What we're looking for is the dynamic or the custom post type or multiple.
Yeah, I was able to make a page
Yeah.
calling in all the dynamic because the generate press is
Okay.
it's now you don't have to pay for dynamic content.
Right. Right.
And so I used that and I got my image, I got my title, my paragraphs. I got, the 10 fields all came up.
Okay.
Great, just how I wanted. And then when I went to add the form, I put in like I thought was the short code. WP forms ID equals 120. And that's
Okay.
exactly what it printed on the page.
Oh, this may be a far simpler issue. How did you put the short code on the page? Did you use a short code block? Or did you
Hang on.
use a paragraph block?
Wait a minute, I gotta hit that little staircase to tell me what all the different things are. I put in the post meta field was the registration form. The name, that was the name of the field, registration _ form. And when it said to put the post meta field in, that's what I put in. And actually, I don't remember how it got that form now.
Yeah.
Oh, I know where it got it from. It got it from the page, the post. I'm making an event and I made a new event and I filled in all the fields from the custom fields. And then when the bottom field was called the registration form and the type I put in was as embed.
Okay. So the real issue is making the form. It doesn't have to connect to any of these meta fields. It's just, it needs to be on the same page when other meta fields are showing up, or is that?
Yes, because we talk about the event and if you have to register. So here's the form.
Yeah.
So instead of them off to another form.
As long as you're using the proper short code, my guess is that you're putting it in as if it were text. And what often happens is the short code content, depending on, can get turned into, we kind of saw it when I was showing that bit with the two images next to each other, short code versus, and when we turned it off, if I had just gone and put it in paragraph, then that block is saying, oh, you bracket, well, bracket is this character versus the actual code. So there is a short code block. The other thing is putting it in is like editing as HTML, putting the code. It could be as simple as your code is being converted into character, your short code is being converted into characters as opposed to the actual short code. We'd have to see it. So, and yeah, maybe what I'll do is, are you on the Facebook page at all? Do you go there?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so I'll experiment with that and see if I see, hey, are you using this or that, or maybe you can even just send it to us directly through like how are you doing this? I just give my email out because it's public anyway. But Peter at IngersollInteractive.com if you want to send me a screenshot or something, and it might be something really simple.
Okay, all right, that's great. I was going to try to upload it to that free, like that Insta site, but it was just too, it took me too
Okay,
long to do
gotcha.
it.
Yeah.
It took me too long to just get it working on my desktop in
Yeah,
in local to redo it.
you may want to, if you're at the beginning, you may want to try the Fluent Forms or
Okay,
the WS Form Lite. Those are both free. And I haven't used WP Form in a while. And when I did, I didn't like it. That was my own personal opinion.
okay.
yeah.
I had to start somewhere. You said,
Okay.
use
Yep,
the
yep.
plugin, don't do
Yeah,
it
yeah,
on
yeah.
your
No,
own.
no, no.
You were
You
going
gotta-
on the right path. Probably
Yeah.
there's hundreds of form plugins.
There's so many forms. There's so many. We had another question.
Yeah, let's try to get to Robert's question real quick, and this might be our last
Okay.
one of the night. So around updating, if I understand it, so you have a post or a page and you want to make an update, you want to make a backup of it, but not
Right.
change the
I've
slug.
got a website and I have a organization.org, the name of my club.org/join, an easy to remember place to go for people to sign up. And I want to update that page, but I want to keep a backup of it.
Yep.
And so I'd like to keep the same slug, but kind of relevant to tonight's topic on building up stuff. What's the best practice for that where I want to keep the
I'll give you
slug?
my answer and then I'll let Peter give his. So what I would do in this situation, what you want to do, because I've done this before, where let's say I'm working on a page or something. This is a little bit different than doing a site backup. I think we've shown this before, but there's a couple of plugins for duplicating pages or posts. I would just type in add plugin, duplicate page or post. It's the one that shows up the most. There's like millions of installs of that. I would use that plugin because what you first do is after you activate the plugin, you'll have a new option underneath your page or post to say duplicate this. So it'll create a duplicate for you and it'll save that as in draft status. So
Yep.
I treat that as my backup. That will have a different slug. It'll take whatever your original slug was. It'll have like -1 or something in front of it. So I keep that one and then I'll make my changes to the real one.
Yeah.
So at least I know I got something in my back pocket. So I'll update the published one. Everything looks good. If I need to fall back, if I'm like, oops, I made a problem, I'll delete the published one. I'll go back to the one that's a draft. I'll change the slug, get rid of the -1, and then I'll publish that. So I'm kind of republishing the backup.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, WordPress won't let, that's the problem. WordPress won't let you have duplicate slugs in its database, only one of them.
Yeah.
Is that your process, Peter? You do something like that?
Yeah, to keep it simple, that's what exactly the one I would use. I use duplicate page with the it's the one with 2 million installs. It's the first one that comes up. What I thought he was getting at is something you had already touched at. Robert, the redirection is another option. It's kind of a lot of plugin for just one thing, but you could use that short slug join and point to anything you want. And if you say you wanted to change it or you had different ones each year, that might be a reason to use a redirection where it's just like, okay, join goes here, now join goes there, now join goes there. But that's probably an answer to a different question, but redirection does give you an option to decide that you're going to use a slug a certain way or an address and then point it to the thing you want to point it to. So
It's good to know. Thank you.
Yep, you got it.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us. As always, we'll send out the recording link afterwards, as well as the slides. We'll post those in the next day-ish or so.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone again for joining. And we really would like
Yeah.
some feedback too on the format of this. Any other topics you guys have? I know there's a lot of good stuff in the chat too. So we're trying to do this going forward. Just have a little shorter.
Yeah, we're refining our process.
We're working on it. It's shorter, kind of a little bit on the front end was a little bit, but then we want to save a lot of time for you guys too, to bring your questions, bring your websites, that kind of stuff. Because I think we all learn from doing that together. So thanks everyone again.
Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of your evening.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Jerry.
See you all next time.
Robert.
Take care. Bye.